to Autism, the show that's unique, totally interesting, and sometimes mysterious.
And on this show, we will be talking all things and sharing all things autism. We have Aimee Hogan, who you just heard, myself, Dick Dawson, and our regular co-host, Booleanenator.
And tonight we will be looking at autism in all its forms, from little toddlers to us adults as well. And we'll be covering new topics each week. And tonight we have a special guest, Educator Jeff. Welcome to the show, Educator Jeff.
Well, thank you very much. It's really good to be here, and I'm looking forward to the topic for tonight because it's something I see every day.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I bet you do. Absolutely. Great. So cool you could join us, buddy. Awesome. Awesome. What do you think, Aimee? Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Tonight's episode is about stimming, and this is a good one. I think a lot of us are going to recognize a lot of things in here tonight, so I think this is a good one. So, we can just go ahead and get started if you'd like.
Excellent. Want to take us right to point one then?
Sure.
Or the intro, or however. Sorry.
That's okay. Sure. The first one is, what is stimming? Stimming, otherwise known as self-stimulating behavior, is a repetitive or unusual body movement or noise.
And it manifests in unbelievable, countless ways. You never know. It's I would say that the old school, the guy at the desk tapping his pen and stuff is technically stimming.
It actually is, from doing the research on this show. And that's going to come right up in there too. You're going to see all of these, and that's one of them. Excellent.
Cool. All right. Okay, let's rock and roll then.
Yeah.
I'm bringing up the thing here. I forgot to get myself all ready here. Oops. All right. What do we got next? So everyone stims in some way. Most people can recognize when it is inappropriate and disruptive to others, where some on the autism spectrum might not be socially aware enough to know. And I definitely, you can really see that because somebody who's tapping a pen, again, will look and see that there's one or two people in the room kind of looking over going, yeah, really? And they go, oh, yeah, right, and stop. So that, I mean, that's the proof in the pudding right there, right?
Yes, absolutely. Oh, Matt just walked by. Yeah, I definitely can see that. You know, it's like you're drumming your fingers on the table and you go, oop. And when someone looks at you, huh?
Yep.
He knows it well. Would that make Bull up next?
It would.
Is that our rotation tonight? Is that what we're doing? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Just settling in, making sure. I'm a little slight painkiller. I got a tooth that's bugging me, so I'm trying to keep up. Sorry, everybody.
That's okay.
Well, we have some very common types of stimming. Most common types are biting your fingernails, so that's a form of stimming. There's a lot of people that do that even aren't on the spectrum. Twirling your hair around your fingers. Again, a lot of people do that without realizing it. Cracking your knuckles or other joints repetitively, or drumming your fingers. Tapping your pencil, jiggling your foot, whistling. So, yeah, I recognize some of those in myself. I would say drumming your fingers goes along with twiddling your thumbs, which I catch myself doing quite often.
Yeah, definitely. Me, it's the twirling of the hair and stuff like that. I was always like that when I was little, constantly with, at least with one finger in my hair, twirling the curls.
Yeah, when I'm worried or anxious about something, I'll very rapidly bounce my knee.
Oh, yep. That's a famous one for like coaches and like owners of racing teams and stuff. When they're watching, there's always that super anxious manifestation that comes out in a physical way, right?
Yeah. Everybody always asks me, "Are you trying to drive a nail into the ground with your heel?"
Another one.
I'm doing it.
No, exactly. That's one of those things. Another one, I think that people that learn musical instruments early on in life have a little bit of a free pass in this area, because you can literally just, when you're sitting there watching TV and you're not totally into what you're watching, you can pick up your guitar and just play along while you're watching a show, and you are fulfilling stimming at the same time.
Definitely, yeah. I've even if you're playing air guitar, that's kind of the same thing too with a show.
Yeah, absolutely. Good
Play the air
call.
drums.
Yeah. You want to take the next one there, Jeff?
Sure. For someone on the spectrum, stimming might include things like rocking, flapping hands, or flicking or snapping fingers. I see that actually quite often in my classroom, especially the rocking. That seems to be something that they find very relaxing, I think. When they're keyed up about something they don't understand, they start to rock back and forth. And the more difficult the subject matter is, the more pronounced that rocking becomes until they start understanding and start picking up on the lesson, and then it seems to subside a bit. But I see that quite a lot. Yeah.
I will actually take it further and say that there's almost a line between rocking and flapping the hands. They literally come from slightly different places on the spectrum. My son won't do much rocking unless he's like on a yoga ball or something. And if you're unsure about the flapping the hands or flicking, think of Brad Pitt's performance in the 12 Monkeys, but it's more intense and they do it continuously or repetitively. I find they come from a different angle. You get one or the other, but not often do you get both. Usually when you got both, the person, for lack of a better term to keep it so everybody understands, they're deeper on the spectrum.
And I tend to... Oh, sorry. I was going to say I tend to grab my thumb in my fist a lot, like squeeze my thumb. And another thing I do, or I used to do this, was the one-handed clap. Like sit there and, how you put your fingers down on your palm, folding your hand in half, and just shake your arm, and it claps. One-handed.
Yeah. I will say that I think even grinding your teeth could fall into this category.
Yes.
Yeah, and
definitely.
I find myself gritting my teeth a lot, so that kind of is a prelude to grinding.
I do that. When I get upset, or when I get a little bit distracted, or not distracted, but just how can I say, anxious, I tend to clench my teeth quite strongly.
Indeed.
My place on the spectrum really comes through when I'm playing my guitar, or a bass guitar, or a musical instrument. One of the things while I'm playing to still fulfill the stimming is I will grind my teeth to the beat of the song that I am playing. I have caught myself and analyzed it and figured it out. It's crazy, but it still has to happen in one way or another.
Yeah. Well, being a musician, you're very much in tune with keeping time, and a lot of that brings out these little what my mom used to call nervous habits. That just
very much.
They're like a built-in metronome.
Yeah, and in order to make sense of the stimming, what happens when you're musical is quite often you'll have a beat, a rhythm, or a song going through your head, and it helps your brain feel a little more justified in the stimming because you're keeping the beat or the rhythm, or you know what I mean? You're playing along to the tune, and it seems to give you a balance and a grounding.
And very similar to what Aimee mentioned before about twirling her hair in her fingers. Here in my classroom, Asian girls tend to have very long, straight hair, and they'll sit there all class just running their fingers through it and pulling it out, and it's like they're constantly grooming.
Wow. Yep, it's about right. I would just sit there. My hair was long when I was young too. I'm short, so it really wouldn't be considered overly long, but my hair was down past my butt, and I would just hold it that was my thing that I found comfort in too. It was grounding to me. Oh, okay, here's something physical I can hold on to that's not going to bother anybody else. So, so I used to hold it in my hand, and it wasn't doing anything with it. Just held it. Whatever
So
works.
what's the next
That's right.
Yeah, I think Amy's up next.
Sure. Do you want to read one, Matt?
Yes. Spectrum shimming continued.
Stimming continued.
Spectrum stimming continued, not shimming. Bouncing, jumping, or twirling. Pacing or walking on tiptoes. Pulling hair.
Yep.
Repeating words or phrases.
That's right. And I see a lot of Matthew in that list. So,
Yes. Yeah, that should have Felix at the top.
Matthew too.
Yeah.
My goodness. Matt's nickname is Pacey Pace-em because that's what he does. It seems to help him. It seems to get some of that energy out.
Mhm.
Even his scooter riding could be a form of stimming too, because it's repetitive. He goes up and down the driveway, and it's a long, he can make a loop out of that, and he can just keep going in that same pattern and just.
Yes.
So that would also be considered that too.
Oh yes, absolutely. And the tippy toes. When my son was young, I don't think his heels touched the ground until he was about 9 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, it was constant.
I had a student in one of my classes last year who was constantly getting up out of his chair and running around the classroom. It was very, very difficult to control it. He would slink down his chair and then lay down flat on the ground, looking up at the bottom of his desk, things like that. Very, very distracting to most of the classroom, but he needed to do it because it was the only way he could get out the energy, as Amy said. So what I did was I basically set up a special row at the back of the classroom for him and a couple of other children who were a bit active in that way. And that way they could kind of let out that energy, get up from their desk and run around their own desk and not really distract too much from the rest of the classroom.
That's a great idea. Yeah. Because that's what they have to do for Matthew too. He has to have frequent breaks. That's in his IEP to handle that, because this one needs to release so much energy.
Yeah, we covered that last week, was it? The individual education plan. And it's so crucial, once again, as a parent with an autistic child, to not just be a participant in the scripting and the analysis and the planning of the IEP, but to be very, very active. You know your child best.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We can't emphasize that enough. You are in my district, in my school district that we have, they have always told me right straight from the beginning when he first started school that the parent is the head of the IEP team. And obviously, because you do know your child best, you know what they do, you know their personalities, you know them inside out practically. So yeah, definitely. And I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah, I didn't mean to sidetrack us, but every time that comes up, I am going to reiterate that to make sure everyone hears it, because it's just too important.
Absolutely.
Whose turn was it then? Oh, it's me. I can handle this. Don't worry. We know what we're doing. We have the technology, the capability. Spectrum stimming continued. Rubbing the skin or scratching. Repetitive blinking. Staring at lights or rotating objects, such as ceiling fans. And that was actually one of the first cues with our son Felix that there was a little something maybe that is going to have to be looked at, because like a mobile above the crib or whatever would actually keep him up, because he would just be mesmerized by it. It was actually working. So, that was something.
When I was young, I would constantly be like, any pictures of myself as a kid that weren't like focus portraits where, they get your attention and make you look at the camera and then take the picture. But snapshots of me, I'm always looking in a completely different direction than anything that's going on in the picture. Always.
I agree there. Exactly.
Absolutely. And Matthew was ceiling fans. My parents had ceiling fans, and so when he was born, we were, we're always over at my parents' house and stuff like that. And he loved their ceiling fan. He was just mesmerized by it. And the television, I'd, be walking around the house rocking him or trying to feed him, and every time we go by the TV, his little head would just so we saw signs right away, and with stuff like that, he just was just overly fascinated with stuff like that.
Yeah. Funny. Krafty says Boole was never young. He was and always and forever timeless.
In fact, Hard, they did have color back then. They even had Polaroids. Yay.
Polaroids are funny because you have to take the actual visual spectrum of color and compress it down to about the length of a average school ruler. You could still see that there was colors, but they weren't all that good.
Right. It was more of a science experiment taking a Polaroid picture than it was actually getting memories, but it worked for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah. Funny sidetrack there. Okay. I think actually it's Bull's turn. So there you go.
But wait, there's more. Licking, rubbing, stroking, particular types of objects. This goes with stuffed animals or fidget spinners, etc. Sniffing at people or objects, and rearranging objects. Like obsessively going back and saying, well, it's not where it should be, and putting it back and then moving it around.
Absolutely.
The rearranging of objects. This is so funny. When my son was young, anytime we went to like friends to visit, the first thing he would do is just, he kind of walks around and examines his environment to just be used to where he is. He likes to know where the things are, but he would always make it to the bathroom, and he would go under the sink and into the things and whatnot and get all of the tubes and tubs of face cream and goops for this and that and whatnot. And he would arrange them by size and shape and certain criteria. You really never could figure it out, but he had it nailed and he always had to do it. And so we would go somewhere and Felix would disappear and he'd be fine. Everybody knew. And then about 20 minutes later, somebody would go to the bathroom and go, you got to see this every time.
Anecdotally, I was reading r/entitled people or something like that. It was some Reddit, and there was a kid who would go into the Flower and Garden Center and just start, organizing the merchandise. And he was actually he was mistaken for an employee, but he was autistic, and he was obviously too young to work at Home Depot or whatever it was, and just it was like, he doesn't work here. he's just a kid and needs to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's good. Well, Jeff's turn.
Okay. Some of the more harmful stimming behaviors are head banging, punching, or biting. And that's actually something that I do see occasionally. Students who are not focused on the lesson, they'll bring their heads down and just start banging their head on their desk.
I'm glad this one landed on you, because I wanted to get the teacher's opinion first, for sure.
Yeah, well, the thing is, from a teacher's perspective, it's we understand why they're doing it, but we kind of have to be a little bit strict on how we deal with it, because we're responsible for their physical safety. And if they hurt themselves doing that, that's our responsibility.
Yeah, so this becomes liability and all kinds of issues all wrapped into one.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, but we kind of have to use some disciplinary measures to kind of help control that, because otherwise the school and the teachers are going to be held liable for any injuries. Because some of the kids, when they do it, they hit their head pretty hard on their desk, and that's worrying.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely.
I will say that the compression jacket that works with people on the spectrum is an amazing tool when they're lashing out a bit like that. Oh, does it work? I highly suggest everybody recommend to their school looking into it. It's not an overly expensive thing, and it's not like it's a straitjacket or anything. The kids love the pressure. They love it.
They absolutely do. Weighted blankets is another thing. That's another thing that we noticed with Matt. Piling tons of blankets on top of this kid. You can't pile enough onto him or have heavy enough blankets on him. He just absolutely just loves it and eats it right up, and it calms him right down. And a lot of the times I'll do that, and then 5 minutes he's out. He's asleep.
That's
So it's we weighted stuff like that is just a godsend.
Yeah. I do occasionally see the punching and the biting, but it's really hard to tell if it's an autistic reaction to something or if it's just an anger, a situation developing between two students. It's hard to tell sometimes.
Yeah, that's a hard one. Sometimes it's maybe frustration. Sometimes it's like you said, there's a fight brewing or something, or it's really hard to tell. I've gotten clocked a few times.
Yeah.
Well, and to be fair, to really describe stimming, to me it is when I get into that mode where I catch myself doing it, I realize that there's a lot of anxiety, and it's the same kind of it's almost the same as the anxiety you would get before a physical altercation. So it's not really that different from being in a fight. The only difference is you're not fighting a person, you're fighting whatever the situation is that's making you need to stim in some instances.
Yeah.
Like a fight or flight response thing. And
It is absolutely. I was just looking at the time we've been streaming, 25 minutes, and the fact that we're just on slide 10 of a good 25, and I am predicting this has just become a 2-part episode. So we'll see how we go.
I think so.
Cool. Well, you're up next, Dick. What do you got?
All right. Let me switch over, hit the little button, and I'll know what to say. Harmful stimming behaviors continued. Excessive rubbing or scratching at the skin. And, it can rise to levels that are close to, if you live in the inner city anywhere, the scratching that, a drug addict might get at. And you always have that little, oh, look, you can see it in their face thing. And the picking at scabs and sores is a huge one. It's foreign. It's weird. It must go. It's just, they can't stop it. And the swallowing dangerous items, especially when younger, when you see signs of the autism spectrum, jump into action and get this stuff dealt with, because wow, that could be dangerous.
Oh, big time. And we noticed that a lot with this one. He always, because of another stimming thing, putting things in his mouth, mouthing things and wanting to feel it with his mouth, he put all kinds of stuff. It's like, oh no, he could choke, and there's a whole bunch of other things that could go wrong. And that was a tough one. We had to get him some chewy tubes to help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to channel it. It really has to be channeled in a more positive way, right? Even if it's
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I think at this point we probably have one more that's continued, so we should probably just move direct.
Yeah, sounds good.
Sure. Okay, number 12 is the quantity of behavior. There is a lot of variation in how often stimming occurs from person to person, whether or not there is autism present. And that is very true. And is it okay if I go into the next one, Boole?
Yeah.
Because it's just a continuation of this one. It just says in autism, stimming can and often does become an everyday occurrence, which might be difficult to stop. It may last for hours as well, and that is I definitely see that too.
And don't if this starts to manifest in a child that's younger, do not for any reason think that you're just going to instantly discipline it into obscurity. Good luck with that.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. Matter of fact, I'd go so far as to say that would probably be the key thing to look for. If it's constant and never ending, then its chances are on the autistic side of the spectrum. If it's only happening occasionally when a person is nervous or upset, then it's probably just, as my mom would say, a nervous habit.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. And in a situation of discipline, even if it's not intense, like it's not like they just crashed your car at 14 without a license, but all they did was something that you just need to curb the behavior. If you see stimming kick in right away, red flag right away.
Red flag, yeah, definitely, because there's something in the environment that's either upsetting them or is uncomfortable to them. Mm-hmm. It's something that needs to, what's causing it needs to be dealt with, not the actual behavior itself.
Yeah. You can't really stop the behavior because it's become a pattern, but you can do something to take away the trigger.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And would that make it who's up? I've totally lost the plot. I was in the chat with a couple of really good points with Mikkel Wells, and I totally lost the plot. Where are we on the thing? Somebody take over. I'll shut up.
Yeah, Bull's up.
Yeah, I think it's me. So why do we do this? Reasons for stimming: stimulate the senses or decrease sensory overload. As in, if you're like this goes into the next one, adapt to in an unfamiliar environment. If your environment is giving you too much or not enough input, you're gonna go crazy either in your thoughts or with reality, and you're gonna need to channel that extra energy into something, and that's what stimming is doing, and it reduces anxiety and calms the person. So that's what's going on with stimming.
I do have a question for the parents on the panel. Would you say that stimming is also a form of calling out for attention?
It can be. It can be. Sometimes it is if a certain behavior does draw attention. Sometimes it is a form of communication, like, "Hey, mom," So yeah, sometimes it is. Sometimes it is a call for attention. A good lot of the time, what he's doing, I've noticed, it isn't a call. He's just in his own world, and sometimes it's just he just has so much energy he has to get out. So he stims a lot, and it helps release some of that energy. But yeah, there are times when it's for attention too. He's done it before.
Yeah.
But wait,
I think.
Well, I was gonna go ahead, Dick. I was gonna go to the next slide.
Okay, please do. Yeah.
Because it was a continuation. The next slide says, oops, hold on. Reasons express frustration. So if a person's frustrated, especially if they can't communicate, and avoid certain activities or expectations. Like if you're asking them to do something that they just don't want to do or are uncomfortable doing, they'll stim to avoid it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Should we get that super chat in?
Yes, please, if we could. Maddie, do you want to
Sure.
get that for me, honey?
Oh my God.
Yeah, come on.
Stop sending super chats, Mr. Digital Demonic.
No.
Demonic Monkey.
Oh.
Or Robot Monkey. Digital Demonic Davros for Australian $5. Autism Shill money. As we all know, Davros Jr. will rule the world of drippy bits handed down from Mr. Dawson. From Mr. Dawson.
Good job.
If you send
Thank
one
you
more
very
super
much.
chat, you have to multiply that by 2. Money. For money. Multiply the 2.
Okay, Mr. Extortionist.
Yes.
Multiply the money by
Thank
2,
you
mister.
very much.
You see, when Matthew's reading the super chats out, you gotta pay your protection money, you know?
Yeah, there you go.
Exactly.
Okay, I lost the plot there. Should we go to the next slide?
Yeah, and I now after me, I think comes Jeff.
It
Yes.
does.
Okay, when should you get help with stimming? Well, has stimming caused social isolation? Is stimming disruptive at school? Or does stimming affect the ability to learn? These are very, very important points.
Perfect.
I'm not that familiar with how stimming causes social isolation because mostly I see it in the classroom. But it does get disruptive at times, especially if the stimming is very physical. And it definitely does affect the ability to learn. And that's where the teacher's training and the teacher's methods have to be adjusted, because there's no way that student is going to keep up if you don't adjust the way you're approaching your lesson.
That's some good inclusive talk. I like that very much. I want to take the social isolation point specifically there. The social isolation really comes in if you got a group of like 4 or 5. I'm in a townhouse complex, and in our townhouse complex, there's 3 cul-de-sacs and a couple of little streets, and there is 5 other autistic children in this townhouse complex. It's unbelievable the way it's worked out, and you can see that in this little safe zone, if Felix is out hanging out with a few of the kids, and he's doing a little stimming, hand twitching and whatnot, repeating himself with some scripting, the other kids, they just keep doing their thing, and Felix is kind of hanging with them and sort of playing along, but sort of not. But when we're out in the general public, 1 out of 4 or 5 children will really react with a obvious, whoa, what is this person doing effect? And that is where the social isolation comes from. And really, keeping the dialogue open and the knowledge and education flowing about what autism is the best way around that, because it's not like they're going to stop.
Absolutely, and I can second that wholeheartedly with the social isolation thing, because a lot of people it's can be, if they've never seen it before, can be alarming, and some people, most of the time, I can just say, oh, yep, he has autism, and I can explain what's going on and everything. Some people aren't so receptive to that, but but when we go into Walmart, though, we'll say there are a lot of people in there who understand and know, and they say, oh, yep, we know this is Matthew. We know them. He's harmless. He's perfectly fine. That's just his way of, working through being able to shop with his mother, and it works out perfect. But most of the time, yeah, some people, it can be alarming to them. Which is too bad, because they kind of need it sometimes to make it through through what they're doing and their activities. So it can be isolating.
It absolutely can be, but it doesn't have to be. And, I think, just looking at what we're doing here and it just bringing it out and talking about it. Anybody who catches this show now, when they see it the next time, instead of a little, oh, what's that? We'll have that little grin on their face. I know what you're doing. Boom. Yep. Another battle won, right?
Exactly. And that's why I always advocate for it. And I'm always for education and explaining things and talking about the experiences that we have, because it is education. Education is key.
Absolutely. And, I will say this, unfortunately, maybe this is a tad harsh, but, I do that from time to time. But I will say that you can literally, if you see a child react negatively to another child acting out one of the behaviors of the autism spectrum, you can 75% of the time you can close your eyes and visualize the parents, and you're going to be pretty much right.
Yep.
I'm sorry, but it is true. But let's not go down that road any further. But I just had to throw it in there. So, next slide. Shut me up. Like seriously now.
It's your turn, Dick.
Ah, geez. Of course it is. All right. All right. What's coming up here? Okay. Are we on the continue to get help? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
When should you get help with stimming continued? Does stimming cause problems for other family members? And, stimming can manifest in somewhat more physically demanding ways to deal with. And is stimming destructive or dangerous? And that's the extreme of that. You will literally find kids that, again, for lack of a better term, so everybody's on the same page, are so deep in the autism spectrum that we're putting helmets on people to protect themselves from themselves.
Yeah. A lot of the time that will develop into a situation of a self-harm or self-mutilation, cutting and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely agree that is manifestation of spectral behaviors, 100%.
Me too. Thankfully, he doesn't do that. He just mostly does the normal ones. So I don't try to stop him from doing most of the stimming he does, because it's mostly just repeating words and pacing and stuff like that. It helps him, so actually I'm fine with it. Plus any noises that he might make, even noises that he makes in his throat sometimes, to me it's radar and I know where he is. So it's kind of like so those ones I encourage. Others, if he gets really upset and like during a meltdown or something and he's punching and hitting and lashing out, then yes, those behaviors we try to, just make sure he's in a safe place and everything like that. And those, you need to get help with. But the other ones don't. The other ones I just let him do, because if we don't, then things will escalate and he's going to have a harder time. So.
Exactly. Now, I just asked everybody viewing, we're on slide 18 of 25. So should we finish up or do a part 2? And after I asked, I thought to myself, we could go a little faster through them and finish and wrap it up inside of the hour, because once we cover the basics of autism the way we're doing it, we're going to dive deeper into each topic. So I say we just finish them and maybe not dwell quite so long on each point, because we're going to get deep soon.
Yeah. I would agree. I mean, we've got like 20 minutes left. We could do it.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah, exactly.
We can plow right through this.
We can
and
get
everybody
through
else. Yeah, the votes are coming in as keep going, right? Exactly. It would not be fair to leave everybody hanging, because I really like this topic and I think we should do it. So on that note, I'll shut up. Next slide, please.
Back to Aimee.
Thank you. Okay. Things to keep in mind when looking for the causes of stimming. And these next slides are pretty much self-explanatory, so it should be easy to get through. So the things to keep in mind are to reduce or eliminate the triggers, lower stress, and provide a calming environment, and try to stick to a routine for daily tasks.
Yes.
Yeah, that routine is crucial. It really is.
It is, and when it's disrupted, it can lead to what we covered last time, meltdowns. So it's almost it can turn into a vicious cycle if it's not maintained.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Sure can.
I'm saving the rest for later.
And I'll notice that even during the routine, as we're coming up on the next scheduled task, Felix will start to stim a bit, because he's looking forward to it, because the routine works.
It sure does. We get that too. I call it positive stimming, because they're excited about the next thing.
And the great thing about technology that we have these days, most kids do have an iPad or some form of electronic device. And you can download all kinds of free apps that will actually just pop off an alarm whenever you set it. So you can really automate their routine and just keep them on track that way.
Yeah.
Very good point.
Absolutely.
Oh, that was definitely the next slide call. I heard that absolutely was too firm for me.
And things to keep in mind when looking for the causes of stimming continued. Encourage acceptable behaviors and self-control, and don't punish the stimming behavior. It could be replaced with a worse behavior, and the need to stim is always there.
Yes.
Yep.
One quick note on the self-control: 3 deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth, slowly, is very easily taught. And I just, when I learned that one, yes, thank you very much. Can I give you money for a down payment on your house for teaching me that trick?
Yes, when Matt does his, he goes, Zen.
Yes.
I think one of the big problems with many parents who have just realized that their child is autistic is that they don't realize how easy sometimes it can be to deal with it. They often make too big of a deal out of it and make the problem worse. I don't know if I'm hitting the nail on the head here, but that's kind of what I see.
Oh, you really hit it. And being able to recognize the behaviors, even if you don't know what's truly driving them, maybe the spectrum in the background, but yourself being an educator, being able to just recognize them, at least it's working. The system is in place because you get it, right?
Yeah. But just simple things like slow breaths in and out can go a long way. I mean, everything does not have to be a visit to your psychotherapist or whatever.
Right. Absolutely.
I think that means the next slide then.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Which we haven't heard from Jeff in a while. I think it's his turn.
Yes.
Actually, it's your turn, Bull. But I'll take this slide. That's okay.
No, I don't mind taking it, but things...
No, that's fine. I'm good. Things to keep in mind when you're looking for the causes of stimming. Teach an alternate behavior that also helps to meet the same needs. Hand flipping can be replaced with squeezing a stress ball. Very good point. And other fine motor activities, like a fidget spinner. Those are great little tools to really, really help focus them and control the stimming behavior.
They are very, very good. And there's also, I would say, a tiny bit of knowledge of engineering that could come from it and stuff. Why is it balanced, and why does it keep the spin so well, and you could actually, teach about the bearings and the balance of the object and, angular momentum, and actually a good toy.
I actually got one, like a couple years back. I got one, and I don't know what happened to it. I think it got lost in one of my many moves. But that's exactly the kind of crap I was thinking about when I was sitting there absentmindedly just flicking it around.
Why does it keep saying negative?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We have one here too, and I find myself looking at it, digging around, and wanting to take it apart to see how it works. So yeah.
I do it myself, actually. I've always got a red pen in my pocket to correct papers during the class, and it's one of those cheapo pens, you push the button down to bring the pen out, and you squeeze the clasp to pop it back in. I'll just sit there clicking it, not even realize I'm doing it. Just in, out, click, 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 click.
Yep.
Exactly. What are we on here? Let's go to the next one, and because we're on track here, we're on time. This is going to work great.
It's gonna work
It's
out
gonna
good.
It
Okay, I
is.
took Boole, so Boole can take this one.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. Consider working with a behavioral or other autism specialist to help you or your child determine the reasons behind the stimming. Find those triggers, and they can help you determine the best ways to manage it. Because while it is necessary, there, like Jeff said at the beginning, we can see what leads them to get anxious or whatever it is that's causing them to stim.
And I want to add another one onto this is have a seriously amazing open dialogue with your child's educators, because if they are mindful of the fact that certain things will cause the escalation that leads to these, stimming, and then the harder stimming, and then, we get to meltdowns. If they keep a mindful eye on things, they can help. Because one thing a child on the spectrum will do is they sort of compartmentalize their behavior. And what I mean by that is they will express slightly different behaviors depending on the environment they are in. Case in point would be my son. He will do things with his grandmother, who he sees once a week for a little visit, a little bit different than here, and again with his mother when he's visiting her as well. And they will change things slightly. So it's that open communication to make sure that everybody is passing on the needed information is critical.
Absolutely. And I've noticed that too. Between here and school, he has different behaviors there than he does at home because of different environments as well. I've definitely noticed that.
So yeah, definitely something to be mindful of. And as we go to the next slide, we have the autism or behavioral specialist may recommend intervening during any unsafe behaviors. And intervening is such a wide open word on the spectrum, but with the professionals that work with your son and the educators and stuff, you will be able to figure out what is the right way to do that moving forward. I'm not even willing to step on that one because it's just too wide of a spectrum, for lack of a better word. Knowing when not to respond, amazing key, because it could just go away quick because whoever was triggering it stopped, or whatever was stopped. Advising other family members on how they can help. And if family is regularly in the circle or the bubble, they have to be involved on everything.
Yep.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And conversely, if a family member is one of the problems, you need to address that with that family member too, because it's possible that there's a person who's not really sympathetic to the person with the autism, and it's usually a sibling kind of rivalry thing, and they can be antagonistic, and that can be causing the stimming.
Yeah.
Very much. Very much.
It
Absolutely.
only takes pulling on one loose end to just unravel the entire fabric of the environment.
Oh, well said. Well said. The singular thread, right?
Just one thing. Yep.
I just saw Jutmonk is in the chat. Hey, buddy. Oh, we miss you a little bit, man. We love you, buddy.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, good to see you, man.
Yeah, but enough about him. Let's go to the next slide. I think it's Boole or Jeff. Sorry, Monk.
Actually, it's Aimee.
Oh,
Yes, please.
I thought I just... Okay, never mind. Sorry.
It's okay. The autism and behavioral specialist may also recommend reinforcing acceptable behavior, creating a safe environment, suggesting alternative activities that provide the desired effect. And that's something we also went into before too. So substituting, well, like, like if Matt's doing something that's going to harm himself or somebody else, we can say, well, hey, Matt, let's do this. it still will provide the same effect, but it's safer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Absolutely.
and safer is key. Absolutely key.
Certainly is.
I think Boole's going to take us through the next one.
Yes, now that the rotation is back in order.
But hold on. In the beginning, Aimee did slide 1, but I feel like I'm on slide 1 now, or the top of the order, because Aimee went after me.
It doesn't really matter.
No, let's go.
Let's go. The autism or behavioral specialist may also recommend teaching self-management tools. This is critical because if the child or the person is alone, they're going to have to bring, more than likely, bring themselves down. If they can't, then it gets into other stuff that's, if it goes into a meltdown, that can be more dangerous than even some of the behaviors listed here.
Right.
Working with occupational therapists. I've always heard of occupational therapists, and I kind of wish, in retrospect, I had one. Educators and the educational system. This goes back into the whole IEP thing that Dick and all of us really like to go on. That education plan that is so important, and take charge of that and make sure that it's working, because if it's not, it can always be changed so that it does. And seek medical help when needed. Don't wait. If they're scratching, if they're rubbing so hard that their skin is starting to tear or something like that, yeah, you get a doctor involved, and don't wait till it becomes an even bigger problem.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well said, man. That was awesome.
That was.
And does that not leave Educator Jeff to close out the show for us?
Oh, geez, I'm honored.
Yeah.
Stimming behaviors can come and go according to circumstances. Sometimes they get better as the child matures, but they can also become worse during stressful times. And I think this is probably the truest statement I've ever read. If it's left unattended, things will go bad and you will not be able to stop it.
And that's so well said. There's one last slide, Jeff. Please take it for us, and then we'll wrap up.
Sounds good. It takes patience and understanding, but many people with autism can learn to manage their stimming. Over time, achieving self-control can improve life at school, at work, and in social situations. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. It's not just about the parent controlling the stimming, it's about teaching the child to control themselves. And that's probably the biggest challenge of all, but that's where it needs to go.
Exactly. It is. And there is so many situations where an autistic person has been given the tools as they were growing up to the point where they were able to fit into the workforce in a situation that suited their particular situation and worked. It can be done. This is something where we can make a serious difference with some education and some effort.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
Definitely. Wholehearted.
Eventually these children will grow up to be functioning adults in society like our friend Boole. They need to be able to deal with it themselves. Otherwise, life is going to be a horror.
Exactly. Well said.
Definitely.
So, Boole, why don't you give us a big good night to everybody and take us out of here?
Well, I'm glad that I'm learning more and more about myself, because it's been tough going undiagnosed until I was an adult. But it's every time I do one of these shows, and I was telling Dick before the show how honored I was and how happy I was that he had decided to team up with me particularly to do this show. Everyone's a new learning experience for me. So, and it's also a time of relief and self-reflection, because I'm seeing a lot of this stuff from my childhood that was so like the stimming thing can be disruptive. I see that in myself. So I want to thank you all for being here tonight, the audience, as well as Dick, Aimee, and Jeff.
Yeah.
And I think we wish you all a good night. And thank you for watching. Tune in next time.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thank you
Good
so
night,
much.
everyone. Thanks for having me.